Welcome to the Soul of Enterprise Business and the Transformation Economy, sponsored by Woodard, building your ideal practice with coaching, education, community, and resources. I'm Ron Baker, along with my threshold colleague, Ed Kless. On today's show, folks, for the ninth time, we're talking to Joe Woodard. Hey, Ed, how's it going?
I think when he is a 10-time guest, he becomes an automatic co-host. I think
so.
I think that's the way it works.
If either of you are ever traveling, seriously, if you're ever traveling, I would be honored to fill
We're way beyond the gold jacket, Joe. It's got to be co-host. Well, I'm not going to read your bio, Joe, because like you said, people can go to woodard.com and check it out. But you're coming off scaling new heights. I can't even believe you're in the country. I would be on some island somewhere, but how'd it go?
Well, the conference went extremely well, and it was our biggest and most profitable, so financially successful. In terms of size, it was successful. The most important thing is the Net Promoter Score. So our Net Promoter Score on breakouts was in the mid-70s, main stage content in the mid-70s. Ron, you were part of that, so that extends to you. If you don't know Net Promoter Scores, that's not a C grade. That's something completely different. Disney and Apple tend to track in the mid 60s any given time. So the folks really liked it, what we did too, and that's the most important measurement. But I do have some learnings. Picked up some things in my travels. If you think that's a good topic.
Yeah, I do, and I'd like to point out it was your 17th show. Is that right?
Yeah, 17th show over 16 years, because when you birth a show, it starts off at 1, not 0, like a child. So
right.
Yeah, it takes 17 years to get 17 shows crammed into 16 years. That's great.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think it was my 5th, if my badge was right. So
yeah. We're pretty meticulous on such things. But okay, so there's a couple of things I picked up that are about the profession, right? And we have two different groups represented there. We have software developers and we have accountants of all sizes, ages, credentialing levels. It's an eclectic audience. So I can kind of dissect this from several angles: CPA and bookkeeper and developer. But one of the biggest surprises to me is the lack of either interest or attention, or both, that emerging firms are giving to mergers and acquisitions right now. And we've been talking about this thought leadership chorus as well as that scaling new heights. We even launched a buy sell program officially last year. We had piloted it 6 months prior to that. We had PE firms do a panel session on the main stage and talk about the over 3 trillion, and I have that number verified from other PEs, over $3 trillion that has been, is being, or will be poured into the space over a 5-year window, and we're about 2 years in. And yet, overall, people are meh to it, right? And I don't know I don't know what the driving force of that is, because at the same time, one of our data learnings that we reinforced, we already kind of knew generally, but the average age of a practice owner, now not leader, because that leadership stuff starts to bring in enterprise firms, but owner of a CAS practice or tax practice or small emerging CPA firm in Scaling New Heights was north of 65 years old. So it's like between 65 and 70. So they should be looking at this thing like the perfect planetary alignment. I am of retirement age, and there are trillions of dollars flying around in the space. People want to buy me. But our succession classes were our least attended. And of the goals that people listed, and everyone wrote down their major goal on a card, we put them up on a big board. I had ChatGPT read those and then analyze them. It was something like 2 or 3% had goals directly related to succession or exit. So I'm surprised to see that we're still a little bit cold to this opportunity at the small firm level.
Right. I think about this a lot. I mean, don't you think that the accounting profession in general mirrors the larger economy? You have, the top 100 firms, certainly the big four, then you have the top 100, top 200, but then you have all of these, whatever the number is, 40, 50,000 firms that are largely, 90%, I think, sole props. And they just don't tend to think about succession or selling at all.
No. Is I retire, I stop working equals retirement. That's always been their retirement plan, using air quotes for the people not watching the video. And that's probably going to be the biggest psychological shift we have to make is no, there is an actual exit event that's an opportunity for you. And I'll
Hmm.
tell you before this M&A driven by PE, before this did intersect our industry, I would have said that probably is unfortunately your retirement plan. I mean, they don't have very strong EBITDA as a percentage of revenue. They don't have the kind of books of business that translate or transfer well into large firm environments. Their pricing problems or service structure problems or whatever it may be, client size. But now, if hear me, if you're listening to this Soul of Enterprise small firm, you actually have a sellable asset now, even if you
Hmm.
never dreamed that you would. And that doesn't mean that you need to sell this second if you're an accounting professional. It just means you have the opportunity to if you otherwise would benefit from doing so. And I think we're going to have to really shout that messaging as thought leadership.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
What other things struck you? I know you had David Allen was
Yep.
one of the keynote presenters. How'd that go over?
Well, it was he did exactly what we wanted him to do, which is after you've dreamed the big dreams and been inspired by the Olympian speaker, Olympic speaker on day one, what's the methodology then that will drive sustained change? So, he said, I can come and talk about a lot of things I've done in the last 20, 25 years since writing this bestseller. And we were like, nope, the bestseller is what we're buying. Just go straight to the core DNA, talk about the methodology, and talk about what it means to be able to sustain change. Kind of to live, he didn't say Eisenhower's quadrant two specifically, but to live in Eisenhower matrix quadrant two, the path to get to quadrant two, or a good path, is his getting things done model. So he did his job, but I wouldn't say that he ended up even being the rock star of the show. Surprisingly, I think the biggest rock star of the show, even though I had a keynote, Ron, you had a keynote, we had the Olympic medalist, and David Allen. It was the practitioners that we brought up onto the stage that shared from their own practice experience. It's just really hard to beat that. Um,
It is.
yeah, they got some of the highest ratings.
Yeah, I believe that. The thing that struck me, Joe, and I did read a lot of those cards because you did post them up outside of the main stage of one thing people were going to do, and and I just learned this from doing some of the breakout sessions I did. There are still a lot of people hourly billing,
Yes. And at
and
least they were writing it down. Stop
they
hourly.
were, they were. That is, I did see that a lot actually. But how do you deal with that as a membership? I mean, I know you hate it as much as we do, but you want to help them, you want to guide them through it, but some of them just seem totally blocked by it.
Yes, and I think that's sort of the, save the ones you can kind of thing. But we do come at it if you're gonna, so how do we make it as compelling as possible? And we have a pricing workshop that is definitely inspired by a lot of the things you've written over the years, Ron, and Mark Wickersham and others. It's an amalgam of all those pieces I've put together and my own experience coaching and doing the work. But I think is if where we've seen the greatest change, greatest potential for change is where we talk not about flattening what you're currently doing, which people mistake for, it's stopping one level of bleed. At least I don't punish myself the more efficient I am, right? But flat is not value. I know that everybody in this room gets that. And so once they understand the distinction between flat and value, they're freshly inspired to go for the value piece.
Mhm.
And you made a statement some 15 years ago or so in your book that said that value pricing is at it. Maybe it's not a mathematical formula, but at its nature, at its essence, value pricing is pricing underneath the wealth that you generate. We make a big deal about that in our coach community. So first we start with how can you discover new ways to create wealth? And what I find is once they realize that I might be able to increase wealth just with spend management services for a client doing 2 million in sales by $50,000, 5 million in sales every year by, 500 or $700,000, it emboldens them. See, it's not just about the pricing methodology of in the way you pitch it. It's about the way they view themselves. And as long as they view themselves as the generators of a necessary evil or utility, they will always price that way. And the best I could ever hope for is to flatten what they're currently doing hourly. And we all know that problem. As soon as you flatten what you're doing hourly, you absorb all the risk and you don't get a tremendous amount of the reward. And that risk causes them to stay in the hourly pocket. We just bust through that, make it all about wealth generation.
Right, right. And I really like that. And I know that ties into your scope of or nature of work rather than the scope of work. And
That's
in that,
exactly right.
yeah,
Nature.
and the nature of the work you have. What are the buckets? You have three, I think. One is spend
Yeah.
management, risk management, and
Yes, what inside of controllership, we have managerial compliance, we have regulatory compliance, and we have risk mitigation. And we have them start with managerial compliance because that's where the spend management comes in and that's where the savings come in. So you can lead almost with contra accounting costs, if you want to frame
mhm,
it that way. And then it emboldens them to start doing the real stuff, the coaching, the mentorship, the FP&A. And that's where the real value pricing comes in. Yeah.
right, right. I know because I did a breakout on why I got into hourly billing way back. I can't believe this, 1989 or whatever it was. And it was to create a better customer experience. It had nothing to do with all the economics and marketing that we teach today. It was just, we wanted to give a better customer experience like Disney or Lexus or whatever. And I got a ton of questions. All the questions, even in my town hall, were all around value pricing. How do I get to value pricing? How do I move off hourly billing? And what I said was, and I gave him a cheating formula. I said, start with hours, add some things to it, and now that becomes the floor that you never go below.
Never go before. It's a walkaway number. We call it a
It's
walkaway number.
that's it. And therefore there is no cap on the ceiling like there is with the hourly rate because you've got two more options you can add that are going to be a higher price, and most people are going to pick the middle
Yes.
and some will pick the top. And I mean, that they seem to get that, but I don't know. And it could just because they were new. Maybe it was their first year at scaling, and I understand that this might have been the first time they've ever heard of it. But I also got a lot of pushback from a lot of people that you think would know better by now.
Well, and I think it's all a risk. They're afraid to stop billing by the hour because they're afraid they're going to give away their time, and that's a whole other segment. But because you can't give away something you don't have.
Right.
Um,
Very true. Okay, well, Joe, this is flying by. I knew it would. And folks, I'd like to remind you if you want to contact me or Ed, send us an email to asktsoe@thresholdnow.com. Do check out our Patreon channel where you can become a member and you can get access to our content. At certain levels, you get a shout out like Blake Oliver did. You can check out Blake Oliver at earmarkcpe.com and actually earn CPE credits for listening to podcasts like this one and many others. And now a word from our sponsors.
And we are back on the Soul of Enterprise with ninth time guest Joe Woodard. And Joe, I want to just pick up on a couple of the things that you were talking with Ron about with regarding hourly. I want to share with you a story that happened to me this week. And Ron was actually a part of this conversation. We were on with some practitioners. One very smart guy, has a great practice. Came in and said, yeah, this is all great, but I've been successfully billing by the hour for 20 years. In fact, I'm good at it. My customers love me. I sell them a block of hour at the beginning of every year, blocks of hours at the beginning of every year. So I get paid all up front for everything. And he says, it's fantastic. And I said to him, well, when you get paid, where does that go? Where do you put it? Where do you put it on the books? He said, well, it's prepaid. It's a liability. Like, try selling your firm. Yeah. Right. It's like, and you could actually just see his face, Joe, is like, and I'm not an accountant, right? And all of a sudden I'm like, all you do, change that to a subscription and
exactly. With an annual payment cycle, and suddenly you don't have a liability. You have
it's recurring revenue instead of a liability. And so this was confounding to me. So it got me to rethinking this whole thing about why I think that a big part of this continues to be, and there's a chapter in Ron's first book on this. I don't know what edition it made it in, Ron. I don't know if it was the first edition, but on self-esteem.
Yes.
It is, believe it or not, a lack of self-esteem. And this is strange among professionals.
Yeah. It's a mindset problem.
Yeah.
And then we deal with a lot of non-credentialed practices, standalone CAS practices, and they even have a bigger problem with that than CPA firms. Not that CPA firms have go in very strongly. They still have this utility perception of themselves, but at least they have this credential behind their names that can kind of push through some of the imposter syndrome. Say, oh, I've earned this, I deserve this. The standalone CAS practices, they're brilliant. They're better at their art/science than are their credentialed peers. But they have nothing except their own self-worth to push through that bubble. It's tough.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting. Sage, we did when I was with Sage about 15 years ago, when it was still, what was the Peachtree equivalent of accounting? Simply Accounting. Simply Accounting was still around in Canada, and we did a survey of the bookkeepers and accountants that were doing effectively CAS practices, although we didn't call it that back then. It was still just bookkeeping. And what was really interesting, Joe, is we came back and women were charging 80% of men.
I can believe it. Yes.
So here's a situation where women are setting their own price and they're still setting it at 80 cents on the dollar.
Yes. And I think there are two factors there. Ultimately, the customer is the one who sets the price. Right. So I think there's still
accepts the price. Accepts the price. Yeah. Yeah.
Accepts less sets. Because that's the other thing I tell people is when they say, well, I can bill by the hour, so I don't have to value price. I'm like, well, when was the last time you did a write down? Because at the end of the day, the customer is still going to set the price. Right. So I think there's still a little bit of a back and forth. I think that largely that was a mindset problem, or is a mindset problem. And then we can really go down the rabbit hole of who engineered that mindset problem. Was it sort of imposed upon the inequality of the history of the profession, which was very strong early on, and are they've kind of adopted that and are shedding it, or is it maybe now I don't even know the statistics on this anymore, so I'm not being sexist, but just maybe the primary caregiver might still primarily be the female. And this might be sort of work between the bus stops income, and if there's a different primary provider of the home, they don't feel that pressure and they feel like they can charge less. I'm not unpacked it. I'm taking guesses and throwing darts at the wall, but it's a very fun question to ask. Why is that coming in lower? Now, I don't have data on it like you do from the Simply Accounting days, but I can tell you that non-credentialed CAS practices are majority female owned. And whether it's because they're non-credentialed or because they're female, that's a hard thing to bifurcate. They are charging significantly less than CPAs for the same work. but I don't know
So
if it's gender or credentialing.
right, right. But here, this is I was also thought was interesting, and Ron I think would back me up on this. Is that when we found that we could get those providers to switch to value-based pricing, they were far more creative than their male peers.
Yes, that is correct because they're living on the ground in the books. If it's a CAS practice, they see all the ways that they can affect change, at a ground level, and that's why we love this controllership model. Because who better than this standalone CAS practice to monitor a spend policy and they're staying at the wrong hotel or flying in the wrong fare of airline or flying when they should be driving or whatever the policy is? Who
Hmm.
better to see it than the CAS person? The tax analyst can't see that. The auditor can't see that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a perfect role for them.
Yeah, really, really interesting that they were better and creative, more creative pricers. Okay, but so back to the initial question. What else do you have from Scaling New Heights as a takeaway that you'd like to share?
Yeah. So one of the other big takeaways is increasingly um, the emerging firms and we have enterprise firms there too across the board from sole practitioner to top 100. I'm seeing people not just realize what's happening with artificial intelligence. It's no longer a topic. It's now something actionable. But what they're beginning to understand and the math they're doing on cost to benefit is around bots versus humans. It was never a bots versus humans conversation before. It was always a bots enhance human. It was a bionic conversation. But increasingly, I'm hearing people say that I can spend money on a bot instead of spending money on a person. Now, two things are driving that. One is the staffing crisis, and it's creating turnover as well as capacity constraints. So they're making the decision not between protecting my team from unemployment, which is both emotional and virtuous and causes you to resist that equation, bot versus human. But that's no longer the math they're doing in their head. Those people are already quitting, or there's work that's coming in disproportionately to the people that they can hire and find good talent. Both of those things are happening rapidly. And so what they're saying is instead of hiring another person, I will deploy the bots. Well, that's going to make you go to the bots a lot faster. And it also means they're starting to really believe that a bot can replace much of the work that is done by a human. Now, the other kind of human that they're making an impartial decision on is the human you haven't hired yet, where you can be objective, and it's the human that is somewhere else besides the United States of America where you can be objective. So they are very quick now to say, I'm going to cut back on full-time equivalents in India, the Philippines, South Africa, Costa Rica, wherever they are. I'm going to make the economic exchange for fewer FTEs, full-time equivalents, to more bots because I'm arm's length. I'm dispassionate about that equation. And the role of those things is very different. They're not account managers. They haven't built up trust with clients. I'm not trying to upskill them to controllership and FP&A. They're simply that utility part of what a bookkeeper offers or a tax preparer offers. And when it's utility, the bot and the human are very similar in their value proposition as long as the net benefit is there. Bots don't get sick, but more importantly than bots not getting sick or taking PTO or gossiping around the water cooler and playing politics in the office, bots, it's increasingly aware, are more accurate than the average human being.
Yeah.
And that's really making the difference.
Right, and that's always with driverless cars too. The whole point is it doesn't have to be perfect; it just has to be better than the average human in order for it to really take root. Right. So same
Or
thing here.
worse than for people like me.
Yeah, of course.
But there's an actual learning here. This is an important thing you noted with the car.
Yeah.
I taught the Tesla Corporation, I and however many other
Yep.
hundreds of thousands of people who actually turned that thing on, and I think in some cases risked my life. We taught the AI how to do its job to the point now where the latest enhancements to my Tesla, not only do I not have to touch the wheel, it's all eye attention it
Yep.
monitors, but it actually has inverted it. It asks me, hey, you came out of self-driving. What's the problem?
Mm-hmm.
It puts it into the inverse psychology of why would you turn this off?
Mm-hmm.
Now, and I don't, I don't make sure my life insurance is paid up every time I turn it on. I have confidence. And now, Ed, to your point, and now it drives better than I do. I turned it off on the leg of my drive with my daughter back from one of the legs of my drive from Orlando, and she was, deep in a book or something, and she woke up. She goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I took over. I'm driving." She goes, "Should you not do that, please?" So I mean, that was an actual real exchange. It drives better than I do. All right, now let's put this into accounting world, right? Everybody looks at AI and they look at it from the lens of Tesla 1.0, right? Never again will I trust that Tesla. It almost killed me, kind of thing.
Hmm.
Not realizing that all the idiots out there like me that were first adopters of artificial intelligence in the segment have trained the bots now over many years to do it as well or better than we can do it. It's the same thing, only it's not driving, it's bookkeeping and it's tax prep.
Hmm.
And it really is working. It's 80 to 90% of the bookkeeping cycle is done. Some double digit over 50% of the tax prep is done, probably more than that. And what I'm getting on the bookkeeping tax prep side are numbers in the 95 to 98 percentile of accuracy. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I want to pick up a little bit. Maybe we'll go a little bit over on this, and when you say bots, are you starting to see the emergence more of the agentic
Yes.
AI
Yes,
stuff?
I was
So
going to go there. That you took me
yeah.
right where I wanted to go. It's no more just I'm going to go have a conversation with ChatGPT, or I'm only going to buy what's been incorporated into software, which is still going to be the mass adoption.
Hmm.
And that was some of the reason too. Puzzle, TrueWind, Arrive, Digits, now Intuit Assist being infused out on July 1st through the Intuit platform. All of those are really changing the game too. They're lowering the fruit on the tree. But to answer your question specifically, Ed, I am seeing people either program bots or they're adopting bots, agents that they're stacking together into agentic, so that these series of specific tasks can be done like Lego blocking,
Hmm.
and that finishes out more of the process. So I'll tell you how it would be analogous, and then I know we're coming up on a break, but the it would be like when people adopted automation and then they filled in the gaps with zaps.
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
And a lot of people are still operating that way. But now let's take it to this decade and say it's AI infused in the software, fill in the gaps with agents for those people that want to just really push the edge, like the Zapier people used to push the edge.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, and perhaps we'll return to the subject. I know you talk about more with Ron, but the investments in agentic AI that I've been following over the last 6 to 8 months the numbers are staggering, and we're just starting to see it come online right now, and that's the thing that's going to. I mean, anyway, more later, but we are up against our break. Want to remind our listeners they can get a hold of Ron or me by sending an email to asktsoe@thresholdnow.com. The website, of course, is The Soul of Enterprise, where you can see show notes as well as previews to upcoming shows. We would love for you to be part of our Patreon channel as well. Go out to patreon.com/TSOE. There you can check things out. At a certain level, you can get a shout out, so check that out. But right now, a word from our sponsors, including our friends at Woodard.
Welcome back, everybody. We're here with Joe Woodard for the ninth time. And Joe, we're talking about pricing and the self-esteem issue. And I do think there's a link there. And it's not just females, it's males as well. One of the things that we preach, especially even for small firms or solo firms, is don't do your own pricing. Let your spouse do it. If I was pricing your gig that you talked about during the break, I could be brave as a lion, but
Mhm.
you can't be
Yes.
because then it turns into being braggadocious.
Yes, and that is an interesting point. And also, I like the fact you mentioned the spouse because not only the objective, they often are not involved in the practice, would be the assumption there, but they also can see directly, what the business is doing to take a toll out of you.
Yes,
And it kind of to your keynote from Scaling New Heights, Ron, are you committing moral injury on yourself kind of thing? Well, they seize those elements. And I think the psychology of pricing is about it's like a three-legged stool. It's knowing my worth, knowing specifically the wealth I can generate from my worth, and then knowing what the opportunity cost is of engaging, or you could say the opportunity gain is of not engaging, right? So you have to be psychologically prepared to say, I'm fine with walking away from this.
right.
And that way the walkaway number isn't a bluff. They'll spot a bluff a mile away.
Exactly. They'll smell the fear. Yeah, no, that's very true. And you shouldn't do your own pricing. You should
Yeah.
have at least another pair of eyes looking at it.
At least an objective evaluator of it, like a coach, which is why
Yep.
we're big on our coach community here, because the coach will not just push you up arbitrarily because it's their job to maximize their value. It's that we do end up almost always adding some multiple to what they think they should quote. And what's funny is we're seeing this play out is they'll come to us and they'll go, I think I'm going to quote three, whatever. And then we would actually analyze the discovery with them, right? So we say, don't give a price on that recurring work until they've done the discovery. So we go through the discovery with them and we're like, there's 5,000 a month here for the same effort. It's just the value you're going to bring. And then we convince them. And then they come back to us saying, hey, great news. I asked for four and I got it. I'm like, okay, they'll always split the difference between us.
Right.
They're really happy we got them the extra 1,000 a month, but we were like, if you just listened to us, you could add five. But yeah, we do see that as well. And that objective voice, whether it's a coach, a mentor, a colleague, or like you said, Ron, you don't have any other options or whatever, a spouse, anything's better than nothing.
Yeah.
Have somebody take that outside look.
Pricing progresses by regrets, I think, sometimes. Uh, so the other thing that really struck me, some of my lessons from scaling were we have not done a good enough job diffusing the after action review.
Hmm.
And I'm so frustrated by that because it is the single best way to capture tacit knowledge. And we can talk about AI all day, but eventually we got to get the knowledge out of people's head, like Tesla did with you teaching their cars. We should be doing the same thing, and we're not doing it as a profession. And it's just frustrating because I think that's your invisible balance sheet.
Well, yes, yes. And I think the AAR, and we do that methodology here, by the way. As a matter of fact, we just went through our first of meetings today and to let the listeners know the value I place on this process, because I'm also a veteran of the Army and ran missions this way. Um, I have my core event production team, which is six of us. And I have us going through, it's over 150 different items where we're asking those three questions. What should have happened, what was supposed to happen, what actually happened, what made up the difference. We went through our first 2-hour exercise this morning. We're going to have two other meetings going through each one of these items one at a time, and we will add more as necessary. Now, if you're starting to do math on that, on what I pay people per, the hour or for salaried, if you just take an allocated burden, I'm spending some five-figure amount of money on my AAR for Scaling New Heights as a business owner. That's how much I value it. But you're right. We don't collect the data timely, so we miss things. So we're writing things down as we go in motion. But we also it would be wonderful to find a way to scale that data. So maybe it's not what I'm doing, which is more project based. It's more cyclical work, you can look for those key indicators that sort of how often do they come back around in the cycle? And you can weigh them that way. And I've just I know I'm just sort of brain dumping here, but you mentioned Tesla and you mentioned Tesla doing after action reviews. I don't know if you're aware that every time you come out of self-driving, it actually does ask the question. It's not just that it says what, is everything okay? It wants you to speak.
Mm.
If I were, and I do this often, I came out because I don't quite trust you when you're pulling out onto a busy highway. All right. So they're probably getting that however many tens of thousands of times per month. And then they can start to weigh things. What was supposed to happen? The driver was supposed to let the car pull out. What actually happened? The car driver didn't trust the car. What made up the difference? Well, now they have an actual question they can answer. Why don't Tesla drivers trust that car to pull out on a busy street? And I won't unpack that because this is not a Tesla podcast, but as a driver, I could probably unearth a few things. The point is Tesla's asking the question. They're doing an AAR. It's amazing.
It is. Yeah, especially when you tell them if you implement AARs, you can get rid of the timesheet and the annual performance appraisal, which I think are two things that subtract value from firms.
Yeah, and there's psychological torture anyway on the human worker. To say I'm going to know where I stand once a year for 5 minutes, and then after that I have to wonder and doubt. I mean, so it's not even healthy culturally, but it's not even financially viable either. Ron, one of my favorite things you said to people is because they were challenging, how do I know without timesheets which clients I need to fire? And your answer was so simple and yet profound. You said just ask the people doing the work.
Yeah.
I thought, maybe I'm giving Ron credit for Ed Screen. It was on the Soul of Enterprise once, but the point is that's a brilliant answer. There are all kinds of metrics that you can monitor that we just ignore in our practices.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm just going to jump in and say what it is people are uncomfortable with judgment. And one of the things that we talk about from Peter Block is that every measurement is really just a judgment in disguise. Every measurement is a judgment in disguise.
It's true. Absolutely.
Yeah, because you have to judge what you're going to measure. The other thing that struck me, Joe, is, I did a transformation economy session. In fact, it was the first day, Sunday, and it went over surprisingly well. And I had no expectations of how it was going to be received, but I basically gave them the message that this is the next economic era that we're going into. We already see it. It's already out there. Gave them some few examples from different industries and said, look, products and services talk about, oh, look at what we can do, right, as a firm, whereas transformation's message, look who you can become if you work with us. That seemed to resonate.
Yeah. And I think it's going to resonate even more than the knowledge economy because they misunderstood and the knowledge is not in there. By the way, they're cumulative. We know this, right?
Yep.
You have to perform some services as a knowledge worker. The knowledge worker's ultimate measurement is transformation. So they're evolutionary and they're not mutually exclusive. You don't leave them behind as you evolve. Some of
Right.
the DNA stays in there. But knowledge worker coming back around to even credentialed, non-credentialed, it sort of said, if you don't have the knowledge, you therefore cannot do the work. And that's a misunderstanding. I like to say that the only difference between the surgeon and the mechanic is the complexity of the machine that they're repairing. They're both service workers. They're not even operating in the knowledge economy, but the nutritionist is. And it takes less knowledge to be a nutritionist than it does to be a surgeon. So the very word tended to put a psychological barrier that until I am omniscient, I can't participate fluidly and in a perfect way because they love perfection. So until I'm omniscient, I can't participate in the knowledge economy. But I think that transformation economy, first, they know they've had transformative impacts before, so they can be bolstered in their confidence from that. And I can see myself as being transformational without being omniscient. I think they're going to embrace it faster.
Right. And if you talk to any consultant, they'll say their highs, their HSDs, high satisfaction days, come from impacting the customer, changing their lives,
Yes.
basically. And is there any higher calling than that?
And calling, we're back to that word again. Work, worship, all the things that we talk about, that you all talk about here and we have in the past. I've got to quote Susskind again, that the ideal way to operate is to be paid so that you can do something, not to do something. And I've said it many times in this episode. The ministerial profession is the best insulated on that because no minister is going to go, I'm going to charge per funeral, and they're certainly not going to say I'm going to charge more for a 30-minute funeral than I am for a 15-minute graveside service. So they're insulated and they're automatically in the transformation economy. They've never left it,
Right.
unless they became political or lost their calling. But if they're truly called, they've always been in the transformation economy. So whereas we looked to certain other kinds of industries to say, maybe the nutritionists and physical coaches to say, let's learn how to be knowledge workers. I think we should look to the ministerial profession to learn how to be transformation workers, even if you're not adopting their transformation. It's not about adopting the religion, it's about modeling their work. There's, we need to be watching what they're doing or what they've always been doing.
Right. I hit that message pretty hard about a profession, being a member of a profession, what that means, being a professional, what that means, as opposed to like a gig economy worker. And that did seem to resonate. And sometimes I think we lose that with all this discussion of PE and AI and workflow, process, all this stuff. What's it mean to be a profession?
Yes. And the other things then will become subservient to that, because I want to make sure I'm understood. Yes, AI bots are going to replace certain workers, but they're not going to replace the person who is called to transform their client because AI cannot be transformational. AI can only be, it can be equipping, it can even be empowering, but it can't be transformational. And that'll protect you from the coming disruption.
I think so. So, Joe, usually we wait until the last minute to do this, but I'll ask you now, what, when, and where is Scaling Heights 2026?
Yeah, so it's going to be back in Orlando, and our theme for next year is Strange New World, because everything we've been talking about, I'm sure, feels very strange. Just to rattle them off, we'll be focusing on this mergers and acquisitions, artificial intelligence, the scaled competitors, which we've not brought up in this conversation, but we know they're all out there. And they're not even coming from within the profession. They're coming from outside the profession as multi-billion-dollar global conglomerates saying, now we want to go in like Amazon, disrupted Walmart. We're going to come in and disrupt the brick and mortar version of you. And the rapid, shifts in technology that aren't even related to AI, including a lot of M&A. And then the staffing shortage. And if you look at these, and I've never created a Venn diagram, I don't know they'd present that well in that way, but they definitely are all stacked on top of each other. And PE coming in from the top is saying that staffing shortages, as well as the massive retire off, combined or intersected with bots doing the work, which is combined and intersected with the fact that now we have models that will scale. That really they're not creating the change. They are like the lions following the herd. They're looking where the herd is going. They're looking at the future and they're just putting their dollars there. But they're also predictive of the future. They're seeing that the firm of tomorrow is a firm with fewer people, more technology, higher profit margins, cyclical recurring monthly work, and PE is piling in.
Yeah. I
That's the
hope we don't
strange new
lose.
world.
I hope we don't lose our soul in the process. But Joe, this has been great. Ed's going to take you the rest of the way home. And folks, if you want to contact us, send us an email to asktsoe@thresholdnow.com. And now a word from our sponsors, including Woodard.
And we are back with Joe Woodard for the ninth time on the Soul of Enterprise. Joe, I wanted to ask you a bit just to follow on. We're Strange New Worlds, and I talked a little bit earlier about the agentic bots. I have had a friend of mine who did a presentation at another conference I was at say that the next 6 months are going to be, and this is his quote, unrecognizable. And I was like, and this guy knows where like he's coming from. He's at a VC called Learn.vc, was responsible for Khan Academy and what some of the other big learning platforms that you've all heard of. Like he's one of the major investors in this. And the word he used was unrecognizable.
Well, and I can believe it. When we took this class, one of my teammates and I from Brown University, and it was someone who advises the Fortune 500 that was the adjunct professor, so not an ivory tower thing. And the professor was providing lots of charts on the growth, the exponential growth and development of AI, and it's not a hockey stick. I mean, it's a straight up rocket ship. And so when you get that kind of exponential growth, and exponential is a key word, it's not rapid, it's truly exponential. It's a multiplier of growth. And the big takeaway, Ed, from that professor was not year over year, not month over month, not even week over week, is day over day exponential multipliers. He said that we met every week for the course, and he was apologizing to us for not getting us the handouts until we started each week's course, because he said that he was updating the PowerPoints up to the time the course started, and he said by the time that we're done with this hour, a lot of the information in these PowerPoint decks will be obsolete. They're obsolete within the hour. We've never seen anything like this before.
So what's that? What are some of the things that maybe you see that are strong lands? You think, okay, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's maybe speculation, but what are the things you think? Yeah, this is going to land. This is going to stick.
Okay, you talking about within the accounting profession or just in life?
In life, let's go with life. But wherever you want to go. Yeah,
we've already been talking about it constantly. Is the self-driving car thing? Everybody still kind of scoffs at it, and taxi thing is Elon Musk do another one of his little, get my stock price up tricks. But the cars really are self-driving. That's not myth anymore. I have one drive me around all the time. It's optional for me to touch the wheel. All the way to the parking place. So that's a present reality. And then I read a press release, an article where he's now approaching other auto manufacturers to license Tesla's self-driving software to other manufacturers, because they all have electric cars, but they don't have the self-driving that Tesla has invented. And it's very heavily proprietary to them. They're years ahead of everybody else. So once they start licensing that out, I think a very real tangible landing spot is over the next 5 and especially next 10 years. The idea of you driving versus the car driving you, it's going to invert. So where's it going to land? Let's get kind of to the professions in general. Any area of the professions that's focused on research, development, data analytics, all of those jobs are going to evaporate within the next 3 to 5. Because why would I need to have a human do that kind of data mining and analytics and research when that's the playground of the bots? I also believe that in all of business, now let's broaden it to all of business, there's going to be an increasing knowledge of what is private and what is public. And Apple is leading out with this on the hardware side. They're making a big deal about it's more private by the fact that you can crunch the AI algorithms locally instead of going and calling cloud services. But even the ones that call cloud services, people are going to wake up to what's tokenized, what's not, even if that term doesn't become commonplace, and that therefore they're going to be using it more aggressively because they know how to use it privately. And I think that the trust levels, just like they're 95% of accountants, the trust levels across humanity are going to go up. And I think that the doctors are going to find that they are visited less, that pre-diagnosis, I think increasingly diagnosis is going to be handled by AI. And only if AI says, and now I can't diagnose you for the rest. You have to go see a human, or are we going to start visiting the doctor? Now, you can say that's good or bad, dangerous or not. I'm just telling you what I think is going to happen. We're going to engage lawyers less, doctors less, tax preparers less, because all of that place where we had to make a phone call, maybe get billed by the hour, the bots are just going to give us answers we increasingly trust.
So what about things like accounting platforms? You know, when we saw people emerge from, say, even the DOS days to Windows, the more successful Windows applications were those that were built from the ground up with Windows, rather than try to port something over that was a DOS-based system. Same thing once we moved to the cloud, right? We started to move to cloud software. It was more successful when it was built from the ground up with cloud in mind. Are we at another potential platform shift with regard to the back end accounting softwares?
So. I think
Okay.
hardware, yes, Ed, but I think that that's a little apple and orange. Now, I'm not a programmer, so there may be people that are more informed than I am in this, but I think you're going to see hardware like what Apple is doing, increasingly becoming AI enabled, and they're going to find a lot of words for that. But I think where it breaks down differently is AI is not a programming platform. AI is it's an intelligence that you place onto whatever currently exists. I mean, theoretically, it could even be attached onto DOS data. It's data that drives artificial intelligence. It is its own performing engine. Think of it as the human super user of any software on any platform, and you get a little closer to the orange, not the apple.
Okay, so you don't think it's going to be necessary for accounting systems to be built from the ground up with AI in mind, and that the bolt-on will be
strategic. That's different. You said
Right.
platform, so I don't think it'll be a platform.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
but I think that those that are built AI ready from the beginning or AI conscious from the beginning could have a little bit of competitive edge. But I'll just finish on these last few seconds we have
Yeah.
to say that AI is a brain that mimics the human brain, and that's all it is. So you could argue our brain's a platform too, but okay, that's still a little bit apple orange. It's a brain. Data combined with the brain creates the power. So wherever the data lives, in whatever container or platform it lives, as long as it can get to the data, it can do its job. Yeah.
All right. Well, as always, Joe, fascinating to be with you. Really enjoy our conversations, and we look forward to the 10th appearance on the Soul of Enterprise at some point in the future. But Ron, I don't think we have a plan for next week, so we're just going to say we're going to wing it for right now.
We're going to wing it. We'll ask Joe to co-host.
God. All right.
I'll be on that vacation you talked about at the beginning.
Oh, okay. Good.
All right. In either case, Ron, I'll see you in 167 hours.
This has been the Soul of Enterprise, Business in the Transformation Economy, sponsored by Woodard. That would mean building your ideal practice with coaching, education, community, and resources. Join us next week, folks, at noon Pacific time. In the meantime, do check us out at thesoulofenterprise.com. We'll have full show notes on our interview today with Joe Woodard, and we hope that you have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week.